Okay, so hang on. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you are in the world, welcome. I'm Patricia Magdalena. I'm your host for today's show, and I am being joined by one of our IAUSM mentors and dear friend, Lise Wild. Hi, Lise. Thank you for joining.
Hi.
How are you?
Really well. Today is a really good day.
Good.
Really well.
Good. So before we get into the bones of our show, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are in the world and what you do?
So I am in mid Somerset, and we're having a kind of late, it's kind of grey clouds today, but you know, it's always beautiful down this end of the country. I am a shiatsu practitioner, so very much involved in traditional Chinese medicine. I'm a qigong teacher, also a yoga teacher from previous years, many years of that, and also I'm doing mentoring with women who are going through major life-changing situations, specifically to do with health and menopause and grieving. So yeah, that's me.
So let's tell our audience a little bit about yourself. You were diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, weren't you, back in December 2020? And you decided to undergo kind of a more integrated treatment plan, really. So it included mastectomy, radiotherapy, chemotherapy. Alongside, you kind of brought in psychotherapy, shamanic journeying, something called havening, which I've never heard of or experienced before. All kind of trauma release techniques. So could you tell us a little bit about that process that you went on and your thoughts about fighting cancer?
So I decided, well, I knew as soon as I got the diagnosis, I didn't there was no moment that I didn't have a why me moment. I kind of understood why all the trauma in my life had kind of landed at that point, and I needed to unpick it. And I also understood that my journey was to be one going through the allopathic, like all the traditional hospital treatments, as well as going all through the alternative, which is my bag, because that's what I do, and that's, you know, what my life has been about. And it was primarily because it was a feeling, it was a gut feeling, it was this sense, I kind of saw myself with a bald head calling myself on through this minefield that is the cancer situation and the cancer journey. And it was in kind of waking dream time, because you go to a very strange place when you have a diagnosis like that. It brings you closer to your demise and brings you closer to that doorway between the worlds. And women that I've spoken to around this all contest to the same thing. And in that place, you can become very clear about your life path. And what I say to anybody is, my journey was to do the allopathic and to do the alternate. But, and you know, unless you know you're in a situation like that, you won't know what you're going to do. But I decided to go down that route, and I decided that that was the best thing for me. So in terms of all of the alternative stuff that I did, there was a lot of somatic body work, a lot of trauma release, because one of my big beliefs around cancer is that, and having lived it myself, is that it is about the storage of trauma within our bodies from a very young age. And I really went in to access that, and that was part of my journey of recovery. Was, I feel, a lot to do with the fact that I, you know, dived in at the deep end. The havening, just to say, is it's like a somatic, you're self-soothing. So you kind of rubbing your arms, rubbing your hands. You work with a practitioner that not so dissimilar, but slightly different to the shamanic journey, where you're going into a very otherworldly state, and you're working with imagery or sensation that comes up for you that gives you kind of tools of strength to work through, and working with that in conjunction with the allopathic. And I know it gave me a lot of strength. So when I went in to talk to the doctors and the consultants, I felt in a much stronger and clearer place to be able to negotiate my way through, because this is another thing that I think is important. And something that I certainly, when I'm working with women at the moment, is I'm encouraging them to have the conversations, the hard conversations, for instance, about the dilution of the chemotherapy that they're getting. I'm only a very slight woman, so I'm only 9 stone, but they were giving me the same, or wanted to give me the same dilution as someone who was, say, 18 stone. And I contested it and I pushed against it. And they were saying in their meetings that nobody had actually, that they'd come across, and this particular hospital had done that. But because of that, there was a conversation that then happened. And this is the thing, it's like it's humanizing the whole machine of it that is important within the treatment process. And one of the biggest things for me that really, I hadn't even considered it until the point that I got my diagnosis, but all of the advertising and the push with cancer is about this fight that you go into. With no other illness do you get put in a position where you're seen to be in a fight that you either lose or win, according to whether you die or live. And for some people that terminology works. For myself, and I would suggest quite a big percentage of other people, it doesn't at all. And instead, what works for me, or what worked for me, and I'm still in process of doing, is I'm learning to live. So not so dissimilar to the idea, I think Osho came up with the idea of you strip away all that is not the loving part of you to find the love. And it's the same principle. You strip away all the bits of you where you're not living. You're not living to your fullest. You're not actually being who you are. And that doesn't mean necessarily that you're flinging away your job and your family and finding some new crazy thing to do. It is about finding that core of you in whatever you do. And this is, for me, this is what I'm kind of journeying on with still in my life. And it's a crucial thing within, key thing within my progression. And so I'm still doing that process of working with all of these alternative therapies. And my life feels so much richer. It's almost like I've added the color that was missing. I was in black and white before, now I'm in color. And I would wish that nobody has to go through the process of cancer to find that color in their lives. For me, that was what it was. I went in, I did that journey, and I've come out again. And I feel like I have quite a strong message and quite a strong mission to bring in this process of, I guess, guiding people around and away from even having to go here, and also with people who have been here, particularly women who have been in these situations or in deep life transformational situations where you're up against it. The anxiety levels go out of the, off the scale. I can't even begin to, say exactly what that's like in a body situation. And I think when we're dealing with trauma when we're younger, that situation of stress and anxiety gets bottled in because, the caregivers around us are maybe not producing and providing what we need. And I feel like part of my process and part of all of the work that I do, the key part of it is about finding a way to deeply navigate that anxiety to a level that where we can be, not, I wouldn't say in control, but we can hold it, like we can caretake that part of ourselves, as well as walking. It's an experiential situation where you're walking hand in hand with that, and unless you've been there, you don't know. So it's kind of, you have to come from a place of experience. And this is why I love working with women that are going through these situations, because there's a gift in this. There's a gift in this for them. And there's an ongoing gift in this for me. I'm passionate about. So, yeah.
It's the kind of thing that when that comes to the door,
yeah,
our first response is to run, isn't it? It's to run away and to fight or flight, I suppose.
Yeah.
And what you're saying really is to open that door and lean into it and find that spark of bravery or just curiosity or that knowing. I mean, for you, it was instant, wasn't it? You knew immediately where this arose from in you.
Yes. Yes, I did. Although what I will say to you, Trish, is that in the first when I was going through the process of them uncovering what was going on with me, you know, there's a good few weeks that where they do investigation and then another one and then another one to get really to the fine tune of what's going on. And in that time, my anxiety levels hit the roof. And the thing that really got me through in the immediate after diagnosis was friends, family, community reaching out. I was, you know, there was one point where I got my absolute diagnosis and I was being called in a week's time. And there was one point where I had to be on the phone pretty much 24 hours a day because I just couldn't settle. I had to have hear the communication from other people. And I think that was when I realized how important community is, you know, to have that community around and to call on those people. And also from that came this real sense of, you know, I need people to know who I am. If I'm going to die in this process, I need people to know who I am. You know, I need to be seen properly for the first time in my life, and I need to reach out properly and ask for what I need in these situations. So yeah, that was that, you know, what I'm offering and what I'm guiding people through now is exactly the place I went through, you know, that absolute terror, you know, where it's all over the show.
It's a real lifeline, isn't it? It is a lifeline when you're in the midst. I can't even begin to imagine, like, oh, I can imagine, and
Yeah.
it's, you know, but to actually be in that place.
Yeah.
I know you, Lise, so I
Yeah.
know, you know, I know a little bit about your journey, you know, and I know
Yeah.
a little bit about who you are over the years. But not everyone has that kind of community around them. Not everyone has that insight and that consciousness and that self-awareness. So what would you say to someone who is in the midst of it right now, but maybe doesn't have that community or that realization? What would you kind of advise? Or
I would advise, so I reached out to and still signpost people to there's charities like the one I used was I think it was a Somerset based one called We Hear You. And I mean, they may be nationwide, I'm not sure, but they offer like specific psychotherapy and nature-based therapeutic situations for people. There's, you know, there's often a little bit of a wait list, but I would immediately get yourself on things like that. Or the Penny Bronze Centre in Bristol, another fantastic resource. Macmillan, I tell you what, I have to say, hands down, Macmillan is one of the most fantastic charities. They have an emotional support line, so you can ring up anytime and speak to one of their nurses or advisors. They also have like the benefits people, and they have, you know, they can talk to you about anything. They gave me they do an immediate grant, like I think it's £350 it was, for that immediate kind of just expenses of that you find when your life crashes and you lose your job goes and your income and all of that kind of thing. So those are three things that I did, and I would suggest that even if you don't have the resources of community or family or anything like that around you, I would reach out to and find yourself an online community that works for you. And go, you know, Macmillan is the most obvious, but, you know, find yourself a core and a line of a thread that you can pull on, people that you can reach to that are in a similar situation to you. I did try some Facebook groups where, you know, you just got the written stuff going on, and I found them quite frustrating, partly because the feeds were so long and it was, you know, very challenging to kind of just hear about everybody else's situations and journeys and stuff in such depth without meeting the person written on the screen. So for me, that wasn't an advisable way to go. What I needed was to hear someone at the end of the phone or to have connection with. I didn't do the nature-based therapies that the We Hear You charity offer, because I was doing other things, but that is something that I would definitely recommend. Get yourself out there, get in connection, find a group to be in face-to-face connection, even if it's initially on the Zoom thing, and then maybe they can help you access something locally. So that's what I would suggest.
because all of the work, all of that kind of alternative work that you did as well. In my work, when I've worked with people, it seems to like there's a big weave that happens, doesn't it? As we navigate life, there's a journey and there's a weave that happens, and things are kind of like anchored in. It becomes physical, it manifests physically, doesn't it? It kind of crystallizes and anchors in. And I've found that when you do this work, it unthreads it. It's like the knots untie, and that anchor becomes less, so that the work, the treatment that you get through mainstream treatment works really well. It kind of has this real symbiotic relationship, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And at the end of the day, I think the thing that became key to me in all of the treatment process I went through, both, you know, through the medical and through the alternate, is that we're dealing with people. You know, yes, sure, they're running machines at certain points, or, you know, working with knives or whatever it is that they're doing, but it's people. And ultimately, that is the humanizing point. You know, I think we can do down the medical profession in terms of like the cancer treatments. Particularly, I know I've been party to a lot of conversations about people disagreeing with me, having done the chemo and the radio and all the rest of it. But in actual fact, the people that are there behind the scenes really believe in what they're doing. You know, I mean, yes, there's a degree to which they might be connected in with pharmaceutical companies and all of that. That may be true, but every single person that I spoke to really believed in wanting to help, you know, and equally within the alternate world. And I think the key thing I came away with, and the key sense I came away with, is that no matter what people are doing, I think majority of the time people genuinely do want to support each other. We're just choosing different modalities and different ways of doing that. And I believe now, more importantly, more than ever, we need to bridge those gaps between what we consider to be the alternate world and the maybe the more normal world, and change the, you know, the vocabulary that we're using. You know, we really need to reach out to each other, because we're all human. We're all doing the best we can. And I would suggest that it's about asking questions and being really curious, you know, about whatever treatments you're getting. Just be curious about what that is for you, be curious about how that is for them, and be curious about where the meeting point is, you know, and how that is going to, you know, help you.
But it is putting yourself in the picture, isn't it? And stepping into that sovereign self as well, this is happening for me rather than to me. And I have, you know, in life we have these kind of major moments, don't we? And one of the ones that for me was giving birth, like pregnancy, you know, and sections and all of those things, and being able to be confident enough to ask those questions of people that are in position of authority. It can be quite undermining, can't it? It can be quite scary to do that, and especially if you don't know the question that you're supposed to ask.
I mean, on that basis, I mean, even now when I go, because I've just been for my second year, I have there's a yearly scanning process that goes on. Most people haven't been aware of this, but I've been vocalizing about it. So when you have a cancer journey, you will be tested thereafter. For the breast cancer, they do a test every year. Or tests every year, and I've just been through the second tests of that. But even with those tests, I took friends with me. I even took friends into the room with me, with one of the last ones I did last month. And I would suggest that there is strength in that. You know, if you are in a process where they're checking out, you know, taking breast cancer, because this is the one that I went through, where they're checking out whether you have, you know, a lump that you know that you're having tested. When you go for diagnosis, at the very least, please take somebody with you. Please have somebody in the room with you, because in that moment, if you're given a diagnosis, as I was, I mean, I'd heard about this before, never experienced it until that point, you do get into white noise. Everything, your senses shut down, and the shock process, it's my brain began humming white noise. I could barely hear anything that the consultant was saying, yet alone formulating any questions. And the friend that I had in the room was able to take the lead for that and hold it. So have somebody there, have the questions, talk to the person about the things you want to ask, you know, or get them to take over, give them permission. You look, you know, if there is a diagnosis in the room, I'm going to need that support. Hold their hand, be there with them, let them support you. You know, you don't think you can do it on your own. I can't, I still don't, and would never want to do it on my own, any of that stuff. So yeah.
Someone who can advocate for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is strong enough to do that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might not necessarily be your partner or who you originally think, because you don't want them to go into white noise and panic mode at the same time. Can you record things? I mean, is that an option? Could someone record?
You can. I mean, generally you have to do by prior agreement with the consultant. So that's also a process as well. I mean, I would just say get into communication. I mean, I think everybody's allocated an oncology nurse, which is a nurse that basically takes care of, she's the interface between you and the consultant. And there's also, generally speaking, there'll be for breast cancer and any you know, women's cancers, in the hospital I went to, there was a specific team. So I got to know them. And I would suggest, you know, with your oncology nurse, get to know her, you know, kind of talk to her, pick up the phone. When she said to me, you know, talk to me anytime, I literally did. I was on the phone to her. And so you got to the point where, you know, she'd be like, oh, Lise, how are you? Because I'd be in her mind. And I think if more of us do that, just have those little, even send a little email and all the rest of it, because they can't help you unless you let them. And if you don't have anybody to go into the room with you, like your partner or anything like that, then if you start to develop a relationship with that oncology nurse, you can make requests of them, and they could be the person to be in that room with you, to hold you and to hold your hand. You know, I've asked nurses on many occasions to hold my hand and to, you know, to remind me of things I need to ask and things like that. So it's possible.
Big journey, isn't it? Because that's, you know, we have these things going on, and asking for what we need when we need it is one of those major things, isn't it? It's like our throat chakras have been cut off, and, you know, as women, I mean, it's non-gender specific, of course, but, you know, it's one of those things that follow through with us, isn't it? That we don't ask for what we need, we don't say what's going on for us, we crack on and we make do. And one of the gifts I'm hearing from you is finding that voice, finding that voice of what's true for you and what you need, and being able to ask for it, and also accept it when it comes. Because that's another thing, isn't it? Like accepting help and accepting support as we're navigating life generally, but these big moments. It sounds like, you know, like it sounds like we need like a doula. You know, I'm saying doula, but that you've got that go between, that nurse, but someone who knows the system, but is also, for you, your advocate that is with you every step of the way. It's like we almost need that area filling. So is that kind of gearing into your mental work now? Is that?
It is. It is to some degree. I mean, interestingly, working with 2 or 3 women at the moment, I have been, you know, for the last year, at varying degrees of their, from diagnosis through treatment. And it's been a little bit close to the bone for me at times, working with them when they're just in the 4 stages of the treatment process. I will be honest about that. I think it's going to take a little bit more time for me to kind of settle with that bit. But nonetheless, you know, obviously I've, you know, within that process, I've developed where it is my gifts really lie. And the bit that I'm finding is most interesting for me is that bit where it's like you're talking about the doula for kind of going into the treatments, which I'm at the moment isn't the place, but I'm talking about the doula coming out of the other end. When you're chucked off the train of treatment, I mean, literally, you're scooped up onto an express train that goes 1,000 miles an hour with the medical profession. You know, once you get diagnosis, bam, you've got this whole array of things that you have to go through. Ding, 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 ding. So fast. It's the whole process, and then suddenly you're kind of thrown onto the platform and the train's gone before you can even blink. And out the exit is life, and they're waving out the window going, oh great, get on with your life now, that's fine, you've got the all clear from the and you're like,
We've got PTSD,
how,
haven't you, at this point? Haven't you got, you know, like PTSD at some
well,
point?
exactly. I mean, even, you know, for myself, I did a lot of work around the PTSD and the trauma and stuff, and but the thing that has come up for me, or came up for me during that process, was the stepping out back into real life. Because for a start, no process that you go through with a cancer situation, you're going to come out the same as you are a different person, and you're in process of growing new wings, if you like. So you're still very new, and you know, you and how you interface with the world is going to be different. And so the anxiety around, you know, maybe going to old patternings and trying to do things in old ways that don't fit, and then, you know, it gets absolutely huge. And this is where I feel my skill base comes in. It's like, you got to the point, you got that all clear, but now how the heck do you actually take this new variation of you? So my skill set is really, I really absolutely love kind of delicately holding women in those places. And equally in place, because I also went through menopause at the same time. It was triple whammy, you know, COVID, menopause,
In
and
one go.
breast cancer. I know. So it's the similar place that, you know, I realized that, you know, women, when we go through that menopause thing as women, you know, it's like the redefinition, and by nature, but you know, with the hormones change, all of that anxiety stuff becomes more, the things that we've been used to doing previously in our life changes. We no longer can do things in the same way. And it's the similar, there's a commonality and a common place very specifically. And again, it's the same thing of feeling like you've got wings but you don't quite know how to use them. And the grief process as well. So women who, you know, when you lose someone initially, like in a similar way with the cancer story, there's a grieving process. So when you lose something initially, there's lots and lots of support and everything's coming at you and people are being very solicitous and all the rest of it. And there suddenly comes a point where there's a drop off, where you're still in that process, still going through the waves of grief, but people have kind of dropped off because they've done that bit, they've done their support, they've made their condolences, and suddenly the support network is no longer there. And again, same place, it's that same flavor of like, who the hell am I now on the other side of this? Whether it's a personal loss of one's identity, you know, through the menopause, through cancer, or, you know, equally through losing someone. Where am I? How do I take myself, this new variation of me that's gone through this stripping off, and take it back out into the world? And this is where I want to work. This is where I am absolutely passionate, you know, standing in that doorway and kind of like almost becoating, you know, these beautiful women. It's like, well, look, you have a coat here, you can put this on, this will protect you, you know, and actually you don't need to say this to that person. And, you know, and here's a handbag full of tools that you can take with you, somatic tools, proper practical things, you know, from traditional Chinese medicine, like there's acupressure points, and, you know, there's nutritional stuff, and, you know, qigong exercises, breathing exercises, yoga nidras, all these kind of things that you can have in your tool bag just to drop into, to give you the moment to breathe just before you step out into the world again, new, fresh.
So is that part of the book? Because you've written a book
I
around
have written a book. No, that's not part of this book. This book that the book I've written, that was my. So I wrote two books actually during my process. I wrote a novel because in the first stages around the mastectomy, I needed something. I needed just science fiction kind of thing, and I wrote that for me. I suspect it's never going to go to print, but it's very precious to me. But then after that, I came to a place where, like I said at the beginning, I wanted people to know who I was if I was going to die. And at that point, midway, about 6 months into the treatment, kind of around the time of just before the radiotherapy, I still didn't know whether I was going to survive. You know, there were no conclusive tests at that point. I had to wait longer before I got any CTs or anything else. I was just going through treatment, and it's like I was out of my body, and I needed a way to ground myself. And so I started blogging. And I wrote a blog on a weekly basis on Medium, and it really kept me grounded. And the blog I wrote was very much about the process I was going through in that week. And in part, I got to the point where I was saturated with the "how are you" conversation. I would really encourage us all to find a different way to speak about all of that, because it just gets to the point where you just don't want to answer it anymore. You've had enough. And so I basically would say to people, go and read my blog this week. This is where I am. And if there's stuff you want to talk about in relation to that, then let's talk about that, or let's go for a walk and not talk about any of it, because it was just too much. And it got to a certain point. I think, when did I start to pull it together into a book? Probably, I think I made a decision when I was going through just before the chemotherapy that I was going to start pulling it together into a book. And then I spent the next, so I spent probably the latter part of 2021 and all of 22 kind of pulling it into a book form. And basically it's about my journey, what happened to me, linking the blogs together. It talks about, there's also nutritional stuff that I use. There's also stuff about, you know, how to go in for the mastectomy and what you know, it's a suggestion list of things that you could do. So there's a kind of a self-help quality to it. And it's a very candid, and I mean, if you've ever read my writing, you know, I'm quite prosaic. I've got quite a poetic kind of mind, and that's generally been my writing previously. I've never written anything that's non-fiction before this. But it's a stark way to, it's a way to look at what goes on within a cancer diagnosis. And more to the point, it comes from the common woman. You know, I'm just another woman like you. I'm not a celebrity. You know, I'm not someone who's up there in the echelons of society because of fame and fortune. And I think it's important as those books are, the autobiographies of folk that have gone through it from that. I think it's also important to have the voices of women like myself out there, and men like myself out there, you know, who are talking about it. I think Polden Jenkins, he's going through a cancer story at the moment. And he blogs as well about what's going on for him. And I would encourage more of it, because we need to know. And I think cancer is such a massive topic that people, you know, there's always a inhale of breath. And it's not so much that I want to normalize it, but what I want to do is to bring it to the table and say, it's in the room. It's the elephant in the room. It's one of the elephants in the room here. And it is possible to navigate your way through. And here's what I did, you know, and if that's of service to you, then that's great. And this is what happened to me. And this is how you can navigate through. And I'm, you know, like I say, if that's of service, then my job's done. You know, if it serves one person, then my job's done. And at the moment, I'm going through different publishers. So I'm looking for a publishing deal. I could equally and may still, you know, self-publish, but I kind of like, I'm going through this process. I kind of like to be working with a team of people. It fits with how I've done all of my treatments and everything. So yeah, I'm waiting to hear back from a few publishers at the moment. I've got many more to kind of get in touch with, and we'll see where it goes to. It's called Becoming a Pirate: My Journey Over the Cancer Seas. And there is a funny story around that, if you've got time for me to share. Yeah. So years ago, I've got some friends over in the southeast that call me Wildie, because my name is Lise Wild, and it was the first nickname I've ever had, and I love it. But it never took off, and they've been calling me Wildie. I've known them for about 20 years. And I happened to tell one of my friends around in Somerset about this, and I told her years ago, actually. And when I got my diagnosis, It was basically, she sent me a message shortly after, and it was the funniest message I've ever had, actually, or during that process. And people were sending me funny things, but this wasn't meant to be funny in a way, but it was. She said, "You've earned your pirate name, Lise. While do you want it?"
Those are the friends you want in your life at this moment.
So it's because I've been, because I've been like, oh, I've got to go through and have a
Is that going to be
mastectomy.
your pen name?
Well, it could be my nom de plume. I mean, who knows? Yeah. So
Perfect. I'd
yeah,
buy it
yeah.
just for that.
Yeah, and I mean, it was hilarious. And so the tumor itself was 50 millimeters, and I worked out that was golf ball size. And at the time we were going through COVID, and I was like, there were people that I was, there was such conversation and such dissension with people, and I was sat here inside and not able to go out. And I had this image in my head of me as Wildy Wanted, the pirate, with no hair and a head bandana, with a bag full of, golf balls with tumor written on them, slinging them at people just because they'd annoyed me because of their views on the COVID situation.
Well, that's your front cover. That's your front cover. I can see it.
Yeah, it could well be, actually. Yeah, it could well be. I still have that image in my head, and I do feel, but there is more of it's not just about, the whole thing about the piracy is that, there is something about stealing back your life, and the having to go through the poisons as well, go through the poison garden. So what I've done with the book is, at the beginning of each chapter, before the blog bit, is I've actually woven in the story of an unnamed girl who becomes a pirate, and made an allegory of that tale with my own journey. So there's a running theme through it, and I think there's a lot to be said for that, the piracy kind of side of things, because you have to kind of forge your own journey. There really is. You've got to find a way, whether it's through getting folk like me on side, or family or community, to find your voice, and to stand up and kind of not only be heard, but to speak against what you're being told, and to just to kind of be the one to actually forge a path forward, be your sovereign self, ultimately.
So would that be your one bit of advice then? That would be, yeah,
I think so. Yeah, being your sovereign self. And how you do that, there are many different ways. For me, it's through community and through connection. Whenever I'm going into and I do have artistic tendencies to kind of, isolate myself off and go into the writing. And, I found art as well when I was going through my process. And you need quiet, and, to do that artistic thing, you need quiet and seclusion. But what I'm realizing is I think it's important to find that happy place is the connection. Definitely. It's the biggest gift for me. And that's the thing that makes me happy, is just knowing that I have a network of amazing people out there that I can go out within nature and get to know and deepen my connections with, and feel what humanity is, learn about all the different skills and love and kindness and all of these things that we bring to each other. That's that's my happy place.
that's
nature.
Really connecting with yourself first as well, to be able to access your voice and your intuition and ask those questions about, is this right for me?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have a daily practice. I've had a daily practice since I was in my 20s, and in the early days it used to involve like a regimented hour of yoga and all of that. These days it's not a regimented, there's a joy within it. There's a joy of flow, and I'll often go out at different points in the day. I'll be outside in nature, I'll do my meditation, sit in contemplation, literally looking at the trees and the birds, looking at the snowdrops at the moment on the floor. Aren't they amazingly beautiful? And doing some qigong, and then going for walks, and finding time in my day to connect with myself is absolutely crucial. And there are so many different beautiful ways you can do that. So daily practice doesn't have to look like you know, a special room with a mat. And I mean, it can do, but it doesn't have to look like that. It really is about just reconnection with oneself, you know, in each moment of our journey.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Lise.
You're welcome.
That was an absolute pleasure. I really value you. I really value your friendship, your honesty, your clarity, and the way that you hold yourself in this world. I really rate all of that. So thank you very much for stepping in and stepping up today. It's a real honour.
Thank you, Trish, and yourself included. I mean, honestly, what you're doing here with you know, your sovereign self and the IAUSM community is amazing. I feel honoured to be a part of it, and you know, honoured that you've wanted to bring me on to have a chat with me today. You know, so yeah, I just want to say that you are an amazingly and remarkably inspiring woman. Thank you.
Like attracts like.
Yay! And that goes for everybody out there in the group as well. Wonderful.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and I will we'll see Lise every other week, because we're going to be doing our bi-weekly video lives covering all sorts of different topics and whatnot. But if anybody wants to get in contact with Lise about anything, you can through our group. And if anyone has any questions, what we'll do is we'll have a little look later on our live, and if anyone has any questions, we'll answer them. And basically we'll put those signposts up. We hear you, Penny Braun, Macmillan, maybe we can add those in the thread as well.
Yeah, definitely. Good questions. I love a good question. So come out with some good, at us with some good questions. Love them.
And if you want to share this video, I think it's quite easy. You just go to the three dots at the top, because it's a private group, so you can't share out of the group. But there's three little dots at the top, and if you download the video to your computer, and then you can upload it onto your own wall if you feel like you may have people in your community that could find value in this show today.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you loads. See you soon.
Love you too. Bye.